What's up, YouTube? Uh, I wanted to go over the last couple of years, I guess, for my cancer journey, my transplant journey, my MS journey, and everything that's happened to me in the last, especially the last year. So I guess we begin at the start, which was when I first started getting symptoms like something was wrong, and I didn't know exactly what it was. I thought that it was my MS that was just progressing and getting worse. So anyways, as I was saying, so about, I would say, maybe a year and a half ago or so, I started getting weird symptoms. My fatigue level was a lot worse than what I was usually used to, and I thought it was attributable to the MS progression. I thought I was just getting worse, and I didn't think anything of it. Around the same time, one thing to note, I used to do a lot more during the day, and I've been living with MS for so many years. So when this hit me, it was just very odd because I knew that the MS was eventually going to get worse, and I was going to probably start feeling worse and having more symptoms and more fatigue and everything. But this just hit me all at once, so it was kind of weird, but I didn't know what was going on. And around the same time, I started noticing these bumps, these lumps all over my body. First, I think I noticed them in my neck. Then I noticed them underneath my armpits, my midsection, and I didn't really know what they were. Of course, I went to the internet to try to figure out what they were, and they gave me a bunch of things that might be responsible for these bumps. I didn't know what they were. And one of the things was cancer, but it was such a low probability that I didn't really think much of it. So I kind of blew that off. Now, I had a bunch of doctor's appointments during this time, and no one really gave me a second thought of what was going on. They kind of were like mystified also. They didn't really know. I remember being at my neurologist's office. I had a doctor's appointment with my neurologist, and he had a student in the room with him. He's a professor, so sometimes he brings his neurology students, like his doctor students, into the room. And one of them said, because he also was giving me an examination, and he said that that the cancer lumps are more like they're hard, they're not soft. And then after I left that appointment, I felt my lump, and I'm like, yeah, this is hard, it's not really soft. So I just put it in the back burner. I didn't really think much of it, and I never really gave it a second thought. So they didn't really know what was going on. Interesting enough, the doctor that actually made me more attentive to this and made me realize that maybe I should check this out was my foot doctor, my podiatrist, I guess that's what they call them, because I had a weird incident on my toes, with one of my toes, so he had to do a bunch of blood tests and stuff. But he made me promise that I would, after the blood test came back, he said they just looked a little bit abnormal. It could be the MS, it could be something related to my current problems that I had. But he didn't say cancer, but he made me promise that I would bring this up to my primary care doctor, and they would follow up on it. I didn't really have a primary care doctor at this time, because my primary care doctor had just left the practice, and I actually had the nurse practitioner that took over for her, which she did a really good job. She got me into the right places. She made the right appointments that I needed to see, and she got me connected with the right people. So so this led me to finally see this really good doctor. But he was actually the doctor that once he examined my the lumps that I had, he's the one that actually said, "This looks like it's lymphoma," and I was like, "Lymphoma?" And I heard about that before. That's a cancer. That's not good. But I'm like, "Nah, that can't be lymphoma." And he's like, "Well, I hope I'm wrong." And I'm like, "I hope you're wrong too." But it turns out that I had a biopsy. I went to Worcester for the biopsy, and very, very good hospital, St. Vincent's Hospital. Surprisingly, I thought they weren't that great at first, but they have like a nice, looks like a mall inside the hospital, but they have like trees growing and stuff. But I had a biopsy there, and they took a little note out, and they sent it to a lab. And then this doctor, the one who suspected the lymphoma first, gave me a call, and he started to talk, and into the conversation, a few seconds into the conversation, I knew that it was going to be bad news. And he's like, it turns out it's T-cell lymphoma. And he said, well, this is cancer, but it's a highly treatable cancer. Sometimes you just have to go in and do your chemotherapy, and then you're out for a while, and then you might have to go back. And so it was T-cell lymphoma. So I'm like, T-cell lymphoma. So of course I went to the internet again, and I found out what this was. And it turns out that T-cell lymphoma is extremely rare, especially the type that I had, peripheral T-cell lymphoma. There's cutaneous, which is skin. Mr. T, of all people, actually had cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. And so I did a little bit of research, and it turns out that this form of cancer is super rare. It's like 1 in... I believe the number that I got from the information I looked up was like only a couple of thousand people a year get diagnosed with this type of lymphoma. It's a super rare form of lymphoma. There's the more prevalent type of non-Hodgkin's. There's Hodgkin's, there's non-Hodgkin's. But it's B-cell lymphoma, not the T-cell lymphoma that I had. So I got diagnosed with that, and he hooked me up with a doctor here in Milford at the Dana-Farber, because I explained to him that I didn't want to go to Boston. I wanted to try to stay local. He's like, okay, we'll do that, because that's important to have a local doctor here to treat you. So he hooked me up with a doctor here, and she saw me. She immediately wanted to start chemotherapy, but she wanted me to see, I guess, a specialist on this type of cancer in Boston. His name is Dr. So we made an appointment to see this Boston doctor, and I went to see him, and he was actually the first doctor that spoke about the type of treatment I would eventually need, which was a stem cell transplant. And as soon as he said that, I thought to myself, because I've been doing research on multiple sclerosis for many years, and I've been interested in everything that's supposed to have a promising result for treatment of MS. And I remember thinking, and I remember researching this before, I remember people talking about stem cells and how they were supposed to be a way for your immune system to reboot itself. And well, basically going into that, what happens with a stem cell transplant, it's called an autologous stem cell transplant. And what happens with this type of stem cell transplant is they kill off your existing immune system, the immune system that is riddled with cancer and multiple sclerosis in my case, and they pretty much totally eliminate that immune system. And then to rescue you, they put your stem cells back into your body, and then they go into your bone marrow, and then the bone marrow is like a factory for blood cells. And then these amazing stem cells, God's miracle, because that's what they are, they repopulate your blood with the platelets, the white blood cells, which are important for infection, the red blood cells, which are important for just carrying oxygen through your body, and they pretty much start to rebuild your immune system, I guess. So they get rid of the old faulty immune system that has the cancer or any signs of cancer, and they've been doing this for years just for cancer. I happen to be, I don't know if you want to call it lucky or not, but I happen to be in a situation where it's not only gonna eliminate the possibility of cancer coming back, hopefully, never, and but also it might actually give me a new immune system that's free of multiple sclerosis. So that is the plan and the hope and the miracle that I'm hoping for. So moving on from that, so I had he had me start, and he I guess coordinated things with Dr. here in Milford, and he started me on a regimen of it's called CHOP chemotherapy, which was an outpatient type of chemotherapy, and they did that for about, I believe, 5 months. I think it was like once every 4 weeks or so, and that gave me all kinds of weird side effects. I had nausea. I had I remember the weirdest symptom that I got was I was snoring and hiccuping at the same time, which was kind of interesting, I guess. But so I did that for, I believe it was 6 cycles. So if I did them every 3 or 4 weeks, if I remember correctly, that lasted about 5 months. So I did that, and that actually, after the second or the third treatment of this CHOP chemotherapy, I started to notice that the lumps in my neck were gone. The lymphoma was somehow, it really got affected by the chemotherapy, and it was starting to disappear. And then a few months after I started, they had me do another PET scan, which is the scan that actually, it's a very expensive test that they do that actually identifies the cancer in your body. And this PET scan came back as negative, not showing any signs of cancer. So that was a relief. That's what the doctor in Boston was waiting for. He was waiting for me to be in remission from cancer so that I could undergo the stem cell transplant, which we'll go into. Okay, so after all this was done, and I was done with the chemo, the first locally, it eventually, I was responding well to the chemotherapy, so I was a candidate for the chemotherapy. So I went to see the doctor again, and he told me, he set me up for his secretary, Kathleen, excellent, or the nurse, his nurse. She's an excellent nurse, and she pretty much coordinated everything down to the calendar she sent me. Everything was exactly on schedule like it was supposed to. And so she coordinated all that. And I had to do a bunch of tests pre the stem cell transplant, just to make sure that I was fit enough to undergo this, because I guess this is a very not only risky, but it's very I guess it's very tough on your body. So they wanted to make sure that my heart and my lungs and everything was okay for that. So I did a bunch of tests, and I had to go to Boston for that again. And I guess the test said that I was okay, I was a candidate for it. So even though my MS, because I stopped taking meds so long ago, and I guess the cancer and the chemo and just lack of sleep and everything were really draining, and I was really fatigued. But I guess I was still a good candidate for this type of stem cell transplant that they were gonna do. So the stem cell transplant was called an autologous stem cell transplant, and what that means is they use your own blood, your peripheral. They use your own blood, and what they do, and the first step of this was I went into Boston and they hooked me up to this machine. It's called an apheresis machine, and basically it takes out. There's two leads. There's a part that, and I had to actually get a second catheter. I have one that's underneath my skin, but I had to get a second one over here. It's called a Hickman catheter, and that one has like 3 or 4 inputs for it, I guess. And I had blood coming into blood leaving my body and blood coming into my body, so it was being recirculated through this machine. They actually took out all my blood, they told me later, a couple of times. And what they do is when they take out your blood, or they kind of filter it out, and they extract and they harvest the stem cells that they're going to need to reboot your immune system. So this machine, it's recorded, right? Good. This machine, it basically it takes out your blood. It separates the type of blood that we need, and what they were looking for was stem cells. So it separated out into this little bag, and I remember the bag was just maybe a 12-ounce bag of what looked like plasma or blood or whatever, but I guess it was a bunch of stem cells. So they took this little bag and they sent it to Dana-Farber, and they must have frozen it with dry ice or something, and they had it there for I guess the time that I was going to be at the hospital extracting, taking the tests and going through the chemotherapy, and eventually it would go back into me. So the next part of this was she hooked me up with everything that I needed, basically, from the parking, which was wicked expensive. She gave me a pass so I could park free at Dana-Farber, to the hotel. I stayed at this awesome hotel called the I don't even remember, the inn at Longwood, or the Longwood Inn or something, which was just like a block away from Dana-Farber. Actually, it was walking distance, I found out on the last day. If I could walk, I guess that would be great. And so I stayed there for the first 4 days in Boston, 4 or 5 days, I believe. And during these days, I was going back and forth to Dana-Farber, and I thank my older sister, Maria. She helped me so much. She brought me into Boston with my mom, and she really helped out, just driving back and forth to to Dana-Farber, so she helped out a lot. All my sisters helped out a lot. Each one of them did their own part. But instead of trying to put everything on one, that's the thing you have to remember, is to kind of pace yourself and pace what other people do, so you don't give everyone just the responsibility to do everything. So you kind of spread out the responsibilities. And since I have 3 sisters, it works out great because I can spread out the responsibility. And everybody helps, from my nephews to my niece, which is doing the videography on this right now, and taking notes. And everybody helped out quite a bit. And so going back to the thing, so the first few days I was going back and forth to Dana-Farber, which is kind of like the outpatient part of this. But since I was at the hotel, which was a couple of buildings away, really, I was able to do all the tests that they needed, and I had so many tests. And I thank my brother-in-law for bringing me one day. Just one day I had to do 10 or 12 tests just that one day. So going back to the story, is so I stayed at this hotel, and I would go back and forth to Dana-Farber, where they would start the I guess the pre-stem cell transplant things that they needed to do. So I remember doing like breathing tests, echocardiograms, CAT scans, all kinds of weird tests. But they prepared me for what I was about to undertake, which was the actual stem cell transplant. So I stayed there for the last 4 days of February. And as it happens, the first day of March was when I was to be admitted into the hospital, or they work together with Brigham and Women's Hospital because it's right close by there. And so as I was at the hotel, I was doing the pre-op stuff. Then on the first, I was actually admitted to Brigham and Women's, and I had a really amazing, really high-tech stuff that they have at that hospital. I was put up in this, they call it the tower, and it's pretty much you are isolated from the rest of the world, and I stayed in this small room, which was awesome. Really, it was like they had everything I needed. But I stayed in that room for the whole process. I think I actually exited the room just once in that whole time. And so, not to go off on a tangent. So the first few days I was admitted to the hospital, I started what's called the beam chemotherapy, which is really, really high doses of these drugs that just pretty much kill your immune system. And I did that for 4 days, I believe. And after the 4 days, which was kind of unusual to me, I thought I was going to take a break before they would actually put the stem cells back. But I believe they did the actual transplant right after the superdose of chemo, because I was responding so well to it. I didn't have any weird side effects, amazingly. Actually, had more side effects with the CHOP therapy, which was the one that was done here in locally in Milford. So going back to the hospital days, and I kept a little bit of record on that. And on the 5th day, I had the stem cells reinfused into my system, and I remember it was kind of a big moment, I guess. And if you really think about it, what it does, it's kind of a miraculous thing. So on the 5th day, I had them reinfused into my system, And the hope is that these will go back into your bone marrow. It's called engraftment. And then they start to reproduce. They make platelets, they make white blood cells, they make red blood cells, all kinds of stuff. And they make more stem cells. And kind of a miraculous thing if you think about it. And so on the 5th day, I had them reinfused into my system. And then for the remaining time that I was there, I was just recuperating, staying away from infection, because they had killed my immune system to the point where a sneeze would kill me. And I remember one of the nurses saying that you have to be kept isolated from pretty much everyone because you're not compatible with life, I believe was what she said. Not compatible with life. It's kind of an interesting way to look at it. And so I stayed at the hospital for the next couple of weeks, I believe, and I just pretty much stayed away from any kind of infection. They gave me some transfusions for platelets a couple of times because my platelets were so low, and they were worried about me getting any kind of cuts. I was super cautious, just taking a shower, because I didn't want to fall and cut myself, because that could be the end of it right there. So, but I was really, really cautious, and because I was isolated from the rest of the world, and all the nurses and doctors and everybody else that would walk into the room, they would have to wear a mask and they would wear gloves, so they were being extremely cautious so that I would get an infection. They've been doing this for many years for cancer. Even though my form of cancer was extremely rare, it was still something that could be treated by this type of therapy I was going. And what are the chances, and it's kind of interesting, that this one form or one type of cancer that was going to hit me was also the thing that might actually possibly repair or cure my MS, which was a miracle in itself. But it makes some great stuff for a book, I'll tell you. If I could ever, maybe if I can start to type again and my hands work, I'll write a book. But so going back to where was I? Okay, so I stayed at the hospital. Bored as very bored. I tried to exercise as much as I could. I mean, I had to kind of make up my own exercises at the hospital. I used to do like chair raises, or squats, whatever I could, just to try to stay as active as I could. But I tell you, the whole stem cell transplant thing, it gives you some incredible amounts of fatigue. But I was so used to it from having MS, it didn't really faze me all that much. Everybody was shocked, all the nurses and doctors and everything. I remember talking to one of the doctors in the beginning, saying she had told me that although I'm feeling okay right now, next week, she said, you're gonna, so this was a week after the transplant, I was gonna start to have some bad symptoms, some side effects, I guess, from the chemo. Never happened though, and I was really blessed with that. Even the fatigue, if you really think about it, I was expecting to be to the point where I couldn't even get out of bed or never really happened. I was mobile. I was used to this for so many years. I was used to this because I've had MS for so long, and it's nothing that phases me, I guess. So I spent the days recuperating there, bored as hell, looking out the window. Luckily, I had that nice window, and just trying to keep my mind active and as physically fit as I could, because I knew I was going to be needing to stay active as much as I could. But I guess during the transplant or near the transplant time, there's not really much you can do other than just really be lazy and relax. So on the 20th of March, which was way ahead of schedule, because they had originally said I would be there for 4 weeks, I believe, and they weren't expecting me to bounce back from the transplant that fast. So they were all amazed, and I was amazed. But I guess having multiple sclerosis and undergoing the things that I've gone through in my life, it's just another chapter, I guess. Cancer is a scary thing, but I I guess I was prepared for whatever, because having MS kind of makes you have that type of attitude, as everybody who has MS can relate to. So, and having had something that's just horrific before, it's called trigeminal neuralgia, and living with that for so long, and I still have it, I guess. I had a couple of surgeries for it. That kind of makes you resilient to anything that life throws at you. So, sorry, I keep going off on a tangent. So on the 20th, I was released from the hospital. My brother-in-law came and picked me up. And at this point, this is where I had to start wearing gloves and masks. Everyone that visited me had to wear gloves and masks. You have to be really careful, because in the initial month following the transplant, you're very likely, or you're very at risk for getting any kind of infection, and your body is not really prepared to fight that type of infection. So I had to be very, very careful at that time, and everyone really understood that. Everyone that visited me was extra careful. They always washed their hands. They wore their masks. They wore their gloves. So everyone was really cool, and they helped me out on that. But it was just nice being out of the hospital, out of that little room. It was a nice room, but it was not the amount of space that I was used to living in, I guess. So the second part of this was just recuperating at home, being careful. I had a new diet that I had to follow. I had to stay away from like fresh fruits and vegetables. It's weird. I remember them telling me the unhealthy stuff that you're used to hearing about, like stuff that comes in cans and frozen foods. That's the stuff that it's probably okay to eat, but you have to stay away from fresh fruits and fresh vegetables and all that, which was kind of odd. But I did it, I guess. And after about the first month, I guess, of being home, I had a follow-up here at the local, my local oncologist, which said I was doing great. She was surprised too that everything had worked out so well, but I wasn't at the end yet, and I'm still, my immune system is still a little bit, I guess, it's a little bit at risk to getting all kinds of weird infections. But so far, so good. I've just been very careful and stuff. I haven't really gone out and staying away from crowds and any place where I can get an infection of some sort. But so far, so good. My next step would be, I have another PET scan that should be coming up, but I believe she wants to do a CAT scan first, and only if the CAT scan shows any signs of cancer will they do a PET scan. And then after that, I believe I have to go to Boston one more time and that's what they say. Hopefully not anymore, because it's kind of a problem getting out to Boston. But I have to see this oncologist or this specialist in Boston one more time, Dr. Fisher, and then hopefully I'll be to that 100 point or that 100-day time frame, which is, I guess, what they said, that you've cleared all the hurdles and you're in a not a totally safe area, because you still, at least for a year or so, you still got to be very, very careful. But I'll be past the first 100 days, which are, I guess, the point where they say that you're more apt to get an infection, and it's the more worrisome time. So my camera girl is looking at me like, talk up and stuff. I'm still new to this whole YouTube thing, so hope I'm doing okay. So anyway, so I gotta see that doctor in Boston one more time, and then we'll see what happens. Now, what's gonna be incredibly interesting for all of this, and this will probably be seen after I see my neurologist and he orders an MRI, and they take a look at what's going on with the MS, with the activity of the MS, and that will be the most interesting thing. Is okay, so they gave me a new immune system, or they gave me my old immune system purified. What will this do to the multiple sclerosis? My theory, and everything that I've read, and I've read so much on this, is that it's either gonna stop the MS progression because your immune system is not attacking itself anymore, because I have a different immune system, I guess. So I'm hoping that it at least does that. But other miracles are possible, since they gave me an immune system, and now the blood is, or the stem cells are actually reproducing maybe myelin, or maybe repairing the myelin. So what will that do to my existing disease? That will be interesting to see. So instead of looking for a needle in a haystack with these band-aids, I guess, the medicines that they had me on, which at best just slowed down the progression, they pretty much took that haystack and they set it aflame, and they gave me a new haystack. So this will be super interesting, not just for the cancer and the prognosis for that, but also for my multiple sclerosis. And this is what's going to be interesting and I'm sure that if this works as I think, and I'm hopeful that it will at least stop the progression, and who knows, maybe even reverse some of the damage. If that is the end result, it will be an amazing miracle, and I can't wait to see what will go on with this, because this is good. This is it's been the most trying time of my life. But it's been the time of my life where it's like everything bad that happens to you, if you look hard enough, you can find something positive, something good. And if it turns out that I had to get cancer to defeat multiple sclerosis, that's a miracle unto itself, and we'll see what happens. And I'm just very, very excited and looking forward to the end results. And we'll see what happens. I'll keep you guys posted. Thanks, and I'll talk.